सगळे आमचे CCR TV पळयणाऱ्यांक माय मोगाचो येवकार. To all our esteemed CCR TV viewers, a warm welcome and a very happy new year 2024. You are watching our program In Conversation With. We have been seeing of late, and it is a problem not only of Goa, not only of India, but all over the world, there are problems and they are related to childhood development disorders. We never heard so many cases of autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, ADHD, that's your attention deficit hyperactivity disorders. These are impairments in physical, learning, language or behavior areas. They begin in childhood and impact the day-to-day functioning. We are fortunate that we have our own very outstanding Goan. He graduated from the Goa Medical College in 1990. Then went to the United Kingdom and did his post-graduation in psychiatry and also did his psychiatry with the Australian New Zealand member of Royal College of Psychiatry in the United Kingdom. He is the fellow of Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatry. He is the associate professor in psychiatry in Griffith University in Australia, that was some years back. Former clinical director in mental services in Queensland, Australia, and with specialization in child and youth psychiatry. A privilege to know that he was also an advisor to the WHO in Europe. Welcome, Dr. Savio Sardinha. He is from Kurtori. Doctor, welcome. Nice to have you. After, I think, you come back to go after 10 years or so.
That's correct.
And all the time you were involved with children and their problems.
That's correct.
Do you also have the same problems that I have mentioned earlier?
In Australia, yes, absolutely. As I said, it is world over. Firstly, thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege to talk to the audience.
Goans would love to hear another Goenkar.
Dev Guru. So as I said, yes, it's a world problem, and you rightly highlighted that it's on the rise in Goa. It is because of multiple factors, but more importantly, recognition. And in a positive way, important to recognize these problems early because they have, as you highlighted once again, a significant impact in their future, even in their functioning as adults. Neurodevelopmental disorders are, as the name signifies, disorders of the brain that are prevalent from birth. The cause of the neurodevelopment problems are multifold, but if we divide them into two simple separated categories, one is genetics and others what we call epigenetic factors, meaning things that influence the genetics that make the development of the brain from the womb.
पण दोतोर सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट यू पण हे सगळे प्रॉब्लेम पळय हांवें तुका सांगिल्लो आनी उलयला आनी तुवें म्हणटा आहाय म्हणून आदीं आसले जाल्यार खबर ना पूण थोडे भुरगीं हे भाशेन मेळटाले आतां देर आर स्पेशल स्कूल्स टुडे दॅट मीन द नंबर इज ग्रोईंग.
That is possible because there are more and more problems. For example, diabetes is a disorder of affluence, because our bodies were developed, to work, and now we eat more than what we actually work out the energy out. So we develop diabetes or insulin resistance. Similarly, there are lots of things that are societal changes in societal behaviors that have contributed to many mental disorders in addition to neurodevelopmental disorders. For example, ADHD is a good example where there is more and more research to show that there are significant epigenetic factors in addition to genetics that contribute development of ADHD, and such including gestational diabetes, which is diabetes in pregnancy, can increase the risk of developing ADHD in a child.
ADHD गोंयांत तरी म्हणटा साखरे लागून.
Sakre lagu, actually there is a relevance, but sakre lagu nite, it is ironically sakor sokal dattanana. So lot of children who have ADHD, they go for sugar, but tenge sakor from high down tedona, they become more agitated.
Okay. But ADHD child, kitkom kotta?
ADHD basically consists of very simple 3 symptoms. That's why the name: inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. Now, within those categories, different behaviors are epitomize those symptoms. For example, the child can't sit still for a long time or all the time moving, fidgeting and doing things. It's hyperactivity. If the teacher is teaching and he's daydreaming or he's not engaging more than 5-10 minutes, it's inattention. And same thing while conversation, sometimes you find a child suddenly not keeping in touch with what you're conversing, digressing from one topic to another, is also inattention. And impulsivity is more exemplified in behaviors. They might do things without thinking, they might say things without thinking, and that's impulsivity. So ADHD is a spectrum that can go from mild to severe. Now, a lot of things that we might have missed is probably because there was more tolerance, they had more structure and discipline. Of course, structure and discipline is one of the non-medication treatment for ADHD. If it is mild, that could just be a good enough management. But if it's now severe, we can also think that the type of educational institution or the way things are being done now could be different. It's more structured, or in fact there are more demands. So it is actually uncovering a lot of ADHD. On the other hand, it could be that we are having more ability to diagnose early and awareness of the problem, but the differentiation between what is ADHD and not is very important.
Yeah, but you talk about 3 types that you have said. So now for autism in Goa today, now there are special schools only for autistic children. Is a similar thing, a scenario in ADHD?
Not really. ADHD is not, well, autism with difficulty in learning is a different scenario than autism, what we call high functioning autism. Autism itself is not a learning problem. Autism is a deficiency in certain areas like social communication. People can't shift from one thing to another. Their ability to shift, so they kind of tend to be rigid and almost like obsessed with certain interests. In fact, they can do very well when they are interested in the area of their interest, or they are nurtured in that interest. So there is 2 different views whether they should be having special education institutions just for autism, or they should be integrated. In generic schools. And of course, there is pros and cons for both sides of the argument. From ADHD perspective, it's slightly different. It is again a disorder of the brain, just like autism, except the problem is the attention, the ability to attend. So the front part of the brain, which is more involved in learning. It's not that they have difficulty in learning, it's that they can't encode or register and hence remember what they are learning. So their short-term memory is very good, 30 seconds, but they're processing that memory into long-term memory is difficult. They kind of don't do that very well.
And sometimes they say that it can continue also in the adulthood.
Correct. So it is in a very rudimentary way is a problem of maturity of the brain. So 50% of symptoms continue in adulthood, and 50% people have significant functional problems as adulthood. And the functional problems can range from impulsivity related crime, drug addictions, inability, or impulsivity can also contribute to anger. So it is important to differentiate what is not ADHD, because not all bad behavior is ADHD. However, a lot of bad behavior can come from ADHD. particularly impulsivity.
And when, at what age it is detectable?
Well, the earliest diagnosis can be done even as early as 2 or 3, which I do sometimes.
Okay.
But the treatment and to confirm the diagnosis is better to be in school age, 5, 6, when they start at school, because what is happening at home, so for diagnosis we have to have it in 2 different places, school and home. That's why it has to be pervasive. And if it is prevalent or seen in home as well as at school, then it makes a more robust conclusive diagnosis. So we don't treat ADHD even though it is possible to diagnose earlier than 6. The recommendation is to treat with behavioral modification, non-medical medication approaches. If it persists to a point where it is interfering with your learning, then it is advisable at 6 to treat.
Okay. So what is the scenario like in Australia?
Yeah, so for example, if there is a 2 or 3-year-old child who is evidently quite overactive, not engaging in learning, even play, and that is evident in play school, for example, often the mother or the parents would bring it to the clinician like me, or sometimes pediatrician, developmental pediatrician, and we keep a broad view of what might be the various factors contributing to this. Other medical conditions are ruled out first, and then we observe over a period of time with the history and observation, conclusion being that if the child is still exhibiting the symptoms at play school and at home, then you can diagnose ADHD at any age. So 2 or 3, the earlier the better, because what you give tools to the parents to help the child. So for example, if the attention span is 15 minutes, there's no point in pushing the child to do things at 30 minutes, for 30 minutes. However, if they do it in chunks, small chunks, and modify that 15 minutes over 4 times an hour's work can be done.
Yes.
With breaks. So those what we call behavioral adaptation or modification can be helpful from an early age, and the child then learns to adapt to the ADHD. It's not all medications. However, the severe forms, that's why I said it's a spectrum. The severe forms, that is definitely causing functional impairment in their day-to-day life, schooling, at home, that requires.
But if it is detected at a very early age,
correct,
then you need not go to the extreme.
Absolutely. Like anything else, it is better to be detected early, because ADHD in particular is a neuropsychiatric disorder, and I'd like to put that it actually is a brain disorder that makes the person vulnerable for other mental disorders such as depression, anxiety. Depression and anxiety is common or comorbidly prevalent in ADHD. 80%.
Is it?
80% people will have that. Children will have that. So it is very important to detect it early to avoid comorbidities. As I mentioned earlier, particularly teenage years, because of their double impulsivity of risk taking as well as ADHD, they become very vulnerable to accidents, offenses in driving, drug dependency, and they are very vulnerable if they are freely available drugs around. So it's a double whammy. ADHD becomes a double whammy. So ADHD is a risk to developing other psychiatric comorbidities. Equally, ADHD is well known to increase the adversities in their early life, like bullying, social difficulties, and quite often trauma. So these 3 things, what I call toxic triad, ADHD, trauma, and then when they become teenagers, they are more vulnerable to mental disorders, even if there is no genetic involvement. If they have genetic basis to other disorders like bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, they have probably 5 to 10-fold increased risk to develop those disorders, which, as you know, all mental disorders, by the way, 75% of mental disorders start between the age of 14 and 24.
Yes, this is a critical period.
Correct. This is the critical period. The earlier we detect, we can prevent what we call secondary prevention. We can prevent deterioration. Sometimes the difference between adult psychiatrists and child psychiatrists is we look at prevention or modifying the risks of developing a disorder. Adult psychiatry treats once they are clear disorders. So we, child psychiatrists, and increasingly look at sub-threshold mental disorders. How to develop resilience in the child or coping mechanisms to prevent significant development of mental disorders such as depression or anxiety.
25 or 30 years back, we never heard so much of ADHD. There might have been isolated cases, but now it's very, very common.
Yes, one thing is proportionately there is increase in population.
Yes.
I suspect.
Yes.
But also that is there is an increased awareness of people. Previously, children were punished, punished because they were bad boys, for example. At least prevalence-wise, it's slightly more in boys. It's because in girls it's under-recognized.
Okay.
Girls tend to have much more of the inattentive type, often then as teenagers becomes anxiety. So it's a very under-recognized problem, not that it is less in girls in my opinion. However, boys are more recognized because of their hyperactivity. In the old days, probably, they were seen as naughty boys. And in a roundabout way, ironically, when they were punished, perhaps, sent out of the classroom, that was helpful for them because that takes care of the inattention and problem in sitting still, right? However, what comes across as that a lot of people who were having ADHD and not diagnosed end up having either problems later on, or in fact, in a roundabout way, they do very well in practical side of life, not academic side. They could have done better in academics if they were treated. But quite often they manage to do that talented in hands-on skills, and they end up doing very well in life. Yeah. However, many of them end up, as I said, 50% of them end up having complication due to the underdiagnosis or non-diagnosis of ADHD.
So actually the teachers, right from the play school onwards, could be the real people who could identify such a problem?
Absolutely. Teachers, parents' awareness is very important, but more importantly teachers, because as I said, if the teachers don't recognize it or there is no problem at school, then you explore other reasons why the child is behaving differently at home from school. Because what we see with parents is parents will come with saying, oh look, my child is doing this, and I notice this behavior. And quite often teachers might not recognize it, because some people can mask. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't have ADHD.
Yes.
However, it is often good to explore, are there any family issues or systemic issues? In the absence of that, and good parents, for example, it is very important to diagnose early, because again, parents live with the guilt of saying, oh, is our parenting faulty? And many a times that is possible. But if he has real ADHD, even though the teachers are not recognizing, there are objective tests, computer-based tests, even now advancement in functional MRIs, to know that this child's particular part of the brain is not.
That's nice if there are certain tests.
Yes.
And that they can guide you.
Correct.
For a good diagnosis.
Correct.
Yeah. So is this the same problem in Australia?
Yes, we have very much. In fact, Australia probably has, they call an epidemic of ADHD.
Is it?
The reason for that is because people are getting much more aware. They are not stigmatizing their children for not being able to learn. They seek help early to look at what might be the problem. And many a times, as I said earlier, young or teenage girls come with anxiety, and when we assess them, it is their problem of inattention and ADHD. Similarly, boys who have problems in sitting still or in the classroom are increasingly being diagnosed as ADHD, previously with conduct disorders or naughty boys, because of the awareness of ADHD and its consequences. people are becoming much more aware and coming early. And even adults, for that matter, in hindsight, they are getting more and more aware and coming for diagnosis.
So ADHD starts basically in the childhood.
Correct.
And it can progress into the teen years and then adulthood.
Correct.
What could be done to, minimize?
That's right. So, as I said, the earlier the recognizing and treatment, the better. Now, when I say treatment, it does not necessarily have to be only medications. I would recommend treatment with medication for the moderate to severe end. If it is mild, if you modify their ability to adapt and cope with the situations, they can manage their ADHD symptoms without medications.
Okay.
So non-medication management. So the crucial part is early detection and awareness by the parents and awareness by the teachers is quite crucial in this.
So it has to be a coordinated effort.
Correct.
And could you give some examples of hyperactivity, impulsivity?
Correct. So, as I said, impulsivity is two forms. One is exemplified in behaviors. They do things without thinking, and they sometimes say things without thinking. And you can see how that can bring about social consequences, insulting people without actually meaning that. They regret. Unlike maybe the people who are conduct disorder, personality disorders, who don't have remorse. These people say things, he is too blunt, but then he regrets. Then over a period of time, if he recognizes and he has this remorse and social awareness, he closes into shell, or what we call internalizes the problem.
Is it?
And he does not say what he feels. So this can be both ways. Right? In one way, impulsivity is like he says blunt things and insults people and then regrets, but he doesn't mean it, right? But when it is already insulted, he is insulted, it's done, damage is done. So the other side of impulsivity is doing things, which is, as I said, driving fast. When there is many patients, they come to me and said, look, I've got now a speeding fine. 16-year-old is saying, I've got speeding fine, I've got a court case for that. In a 60 kilometer limit, they are driving at 100. So their social awareness or judgment or holding back, inhibition is lost. And they end up having legal problems. Similarly, their behavior of impulsivity, as I mentioned earlier, makes them vulnerable to seeking drugs. Somebody gives drugs, particularly stimulants like cocaine and MDMA or ice. They actually feel calm with those type of things. So they are increasingly vulnerable to drug addictions and drug dependency. Hyperactivity, on the other hand, is that if you sit with somebody for a cup of coffee, he has to move and all the time fidgeting.
Yeah. Fidgeting is
and
very often seen in this
in the school and with young people, and of course if they persist as an adult. Hyperactivity, fortunately in adulthood, is the symptom that improves the most.
Okay.
However, it still can remain.
And how does ADHD affect adults?
Well, in their occupational functioning, for example, if there is a long, if they have to do a project, or if they can do mistakes, they can be forgetful. Many times people come and say, I forget my cooking on the stove and I have gone somewhere else for shopping. It's a risk or hazard for fire, right? They put the washing on and they forget to put it to dry.
Yeah.
All those things, lapses in not memory but registration and focusing on what they can do or what they are doing. That is how functionally it affects more. Academically, of course, if they are particularly young adults at university, they can't focus for long and they almost sometimes give up. It's not the problem they are not capable, it's just that they have ADHD.
So it's quite a serious problem if one does not tackle it right at the beginning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you are an expert in child psychiatry.
That's correct.
What made you go into this field?
Well, as I said, mental disorders start in this age. It is better to prevent than cure. So adult psychiatry is more like rehabilitation and maintaining. Once you get the heart attack, then you are treating and maintaining the function of the heart. I prefer looking at the prevention. I'm very curious. My research is in understanding the mechanisms of what causes XYZ. So it is like now we know so much about the heart conditions,
Yes.
what causes heart conditions. So you can think of cholesterol, regular exercise, keeping fit, not smoking, and if you have genetic history, treating those problems like cholesterol and so on and so forth. So it's no different in mental health and neurodevelopmental disorders. If there are parents who have similar conditions, the children, we need to start looking at what preventative or modifying factors can we do to modify the risk of developing the disorder, just like a heart problem. So in my opinion, for me, that was much more attractive. That raised my interest to say, hey, it's too little too late once you get the disorder.
Yes.
We need to do much more to prevent it, and hence this is the child age from 0 to 25. That's my age range, up to 25. That is where you can do a lot to modify the risk of developing mental illness.
It's very interesting that you are from Kuttorkar. There's another Kuttorkar, Dr. Ajoy Shtever.
Correct.
And he has gone into adult psychiatry.
Correct.
Both of you would have been a tremendous compliment for Goa.
Yes, and incidentally, we have done something together, which we are presenting. We presented in World Psychiatry Association in Portugal, in Lisbon.
Is it?
Yes, we presented in 2019. So we are talking to our colleagues. It's how to improve collaboration between Goa and Australia, given that we are niche going.
So I'm very happy that you believe in prevention is the cure. Prevention is easier than the cure.
Correct.
That is, and I think there's a lot of good hope for such children to see that this problem is tackled right from the beginning. Thank you, Dr. Savio, for being with CCR TV. And I hope you come often to Goa, not wait for 10 years.
I'm sure I will. I'm sure I will.
And if you can contribute for your own people, it will be highly appreciated. Dev Bore Karu, Dr. Savio.
Soglang Dev Bore Karu.